Hey, everybody, this is David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT and Next TMT Talks, here for our midweek check-in with our partners over at Media Play News and my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. We are both at the DEG EnTech Fest, which is a one-day conference bringing together a lot of the big studios and their home entertainment side in particular, with technology companies helping get things like streaming to people's houses and now cars. I moderated a panel on in-car entertainment. I saw my old boss, Chris McGurk, talking about micro dramas because his company Cineverse has gotten into that space in interesting ways. Lots of other interesting bits and pieces about strikes coming up and all that. So we'll try and keep this tight, but there was a lot today, to their credit. Real quickly, though, Dan, do you want to say something, anything about this now suddenly mysterious and not real obvious acquisition process going on with Warner Brothers Discovery?
Sure. Let me just a little background. It's produced by the Digital Entertainment Group, 20-plus-year-old group formed in the halcyon days of DVD that's elegantly tracked digital disruption and fantastic array of leading edge technologists speakers today. And David's been here a few times. I had never have covered this before. So it was really a treat to come here today. Best one-day media tech conference in Los Angeles you'll ever go to. It's the Skirball Cultural Center. So
yes, we're both in beautiful places. I don't have my backdrop on, but you have yours. Mine, the trees aren't as beautiful as yours, but you got light. So
yeah, it's nice out here.
Yeah.
Perfect February temperatures.
Yeah, that's my mother was stuck in a house without power in 7-degree temperatures and 80 mile per hour winds in the blizzard that hit Cape Cod. So this is better, just a bit. Let's just say
it is. So I was reading Robert Fishman of Moffett-Nathanson last weekend, and his take was that they could get the whole thing done by offering $34 a share, and at that point, it makes no sense for Netflix to follow. And thought that was interesting. Kind of analyze the projected debt at that cost. It was staggering. Fishman's prediction was that it would come in at around 32. It came in at 31. So it seems like there's going to be a lot of back and forth before this is all done. That was my feeling about it. What did you think?
I was slightly surprised they didn't do a master, but it feels like they're kind of straining a bit. Like they didn't really bump it up much. They didn't really, like there was no shock there in some ways. I mean, again, there was like a $7.5 billion upfront deal dissolution thing to go ahead and talk to them instead. All fine. And the ticking fee got moved up a little bit to get even more even faster. Fine, whatever. Look, these are all 9 or 10 figure sums that make my eyes cross. But that being said, wasn't it, the board was very coy. The Warner Brothers board said it could be better. It could be better than what Netflix has. That to me feels like, come on, Netflix, what do you got? Just show us. Let's lock this sucker down for good. And that's what it felt like to me. But the other thing that I think the sort of meta conversation going on that's really interesting is analysts and others are saying, the team that wins this is the one that doesn't win the bid, then either A, doesn't get it through regulators, or B, goes broke, and therefore the other guy can scoop it up for a lot less money down the road a couple of years from now. It's like a pox on both houses. It's like, come on, how do you both lose by winning and then win by losing? That's kind of where we are.
It's definitely 3D chess. Speaking of regulatory process, there was news today, Deadline reported it, that 12 conservative attorney generals have emailed or sent a letter to Pam Bondi at DOJ today, telling them we don't want Netflix to buy this company, that it's a competitive issue and we don't like it. So the headline is MAGA is down on the merger.
Yeah, MAGA's down. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, it's now become a political issue, though. Ted Sarandos keeps saying it's not a political issue; it's a business issue, and
he's on the way to the White House, so it's political.
Yeah. Right. I mean, he told the president it's not a political issue. It's like, do you know who you're talking to? So we'll see.
I thought that was a smooth way to handle it, but traditional talents don't seem to play well in Washington right now.
No, everything's transactional. But on to the show, on to DEG EnTech Fest. Good stuff. A lot of cool things, actually. A lot of interesting conversations. One, just to start off, Ken Zifrin, the powerhouse, one of the most powerful, connected entertainment lawyers in Hollywood, was on stage with my former intern, Ben Fritz, now a very highly esteemed reporter for the Wall Street Journal, talking about some of this AI stuff. And it was interesting because Zifrin has definitely had has been tracking this stuff very closely. I saw Zifrin speak last summer with Dana Walden, who he knew as the high school buddy of his daughter, now the chief
Yeah, I
content
recall.
officer and president of Disney. But Zifrin had a really interesting point. Basically, that none after the 2023 strikes and all that, the guild contracts that came out of Hollywood about AI provisions, no guild has filed any complaints against any of the studios who are signatories. And he sees that as a reason for cautious optimism that we won't have another replay of the strikes around this stuff. Now, the big question is, what about the people who are not signatories of guilds, who are much faster moving and much smaller and much quicker, who don't have to care about all those provisions and no longer need all of those fantastically talented, very expensive actors and writers and directors that you used to use for the last 100 years in Hollywood? And that's where it starts to get a little complicated because, yes, things aren't still perfect, but
The speed
again,
that this is moving and evolving is just,
yeah,
uh,
it's just
I mean,
crazy.
can't.
Seed
It's
Seed
hard to
Dance
say.
put out a new bit after pissing everybody off, pulling it back a little bit. Seed Dance 2.0 now has some guardrails, but also some new capabilities. It's been 3 weeks. It's crazy, right?
How do you structure a collective bargaining agreement around something that changes so quickly? It's just
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. Justin Inman
nobody's
of
ever seen anything like it.
Nobody's seen anything like it. There was a quote from somebody today who basically said that in the past, yes, we've always had technology, we've always had things going on, but they quoted Matt Schumer, whose influential blog post of a couple of weeks ago we wrote about in our newsletter, and Schumer said, it's in the past with technology, the new technology does one thing better, and that's the problem with AI is it gets better at everything holistically, and
Right. The
that's the difference.
You hear folks talking about how it'll be sort of compartmentalized within the context of their business. And the
But it won't.
fundamental misunderstanding is that no, we'll understand all of your business and kind of be more fundamental than you think.
Sooner or later, do better. Justin Inman of Embarrass is a consultant who does a lot of AI-driven research and stuff, and he had some really interesting data points. And I found some of these things that he posted up. He just did a stand-up, ding, 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 kind of rundown. 47% of people looking for entertainment start with AI. So you need to get that figured out. 12% of all inquiries to large language models from all the big players are for entertainment. Can you
I
imagine
I
how many
photographed
that
that
is?
deck. It's a great deck. If anybody
It's a
wants me to share it.
Yeah, yeah. Reach out to us. We're happy to share. Fantastic. But Justin's point is, how do you get your butt kicked? By not optimizing for the AI inquiries that are coming down the road. And he said, one of the things you got to do, and this is really important stuff for all the people in that room, you got to make sure that all of your marketing stuff on all your different platforms, from websites to social media to everything, all has to be aligned and carefully nailed down. Otherwise, the AI will get confused and start hallucinating and send people not to your movie, but to somebody else's movie. And that's a disaster. So that's a big one. Okay. But it drives uptake like 600 to 800% for trailers when
Yeah,
it pops onto there.
what I found fascinating about that presentation is he talked about adaptation to search, emergence of it 20 years ago, and how over 5 or 6 years you see tools like Google Analytics emerge and the industry wraps its head around it. Social media emerges in the latter part of the aughts as a factor. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, tools emerge. The industry learns how to use it to market, and it becomes a friend, not foe. With
Yeah.
AI, you're looking at a ramp up of 12 to 18 months. It's like really compact in terms of the timeline that this all happens.
Yeah. It was interesting. Kevin Riley, who used to run TV, I think, for Fox, and among many other things, very, very experienced, highly regarded executive, was up for a kind of one-on-one. And instead of doing a sizzle reel, he showed a clip from CBS Morning News, or recently, where a reporter came over to see what they did. And they had some guy with crazy dreads. I mean, it was like the most amazing hairdo I've ever seen, with dreads doing funny things, and, white dude dreads, always a great look, but obviously brilliant, showing the reporter, whose name is Joe, J-O, I don't know what her last name is, this campaign they made with Cartel, that's the name of the company with a K, Cartel, this marketing campaign they made for a imaginary coffee place called Cup of Joe, J-O. And they had multiple Joes working there, making your coffee for you. And it looked like Joe. And she's like, she's like shouting and all, like, oh my God. He's like, her reactions are, because it's her on there. And they had, with her permission, downloaded all her Instagram photos and figured out the voice and synthesized the voice. And it's her enough that she is like, oh my God, that's me, pouring cups of coffee, but also on a barge in the ocean, next to a volcano, et cetera, all these things that we kind of knew were there, but just showing what they can do. And they're not the only one by a long way, but Riley's focusing a lot on this brand stuff, and it's really fascinating things.
Well,
So
credit Amy Cho, who's run this organization for a couple of decades. She knows a savvy technologist when she sees one. And
yeah,
Kevin Riley is that. I mean, he talks about how he got into his current line of work, and he was transitioning, as it's described, in terms of his career during the pandemic. And he did some consulting for an Israeli AI company. It was bleeding edge stuff at this time. The studios didn't know what to make of it.
right. Something new. Hey, there was another good line that Riley had that I love. He had read several things, and he mentioned the Schumer thing and some other things. Another was about a guy who was a CEO of, quote, a boring air filter business that's now worth $260 million. And he looked at it, I'm not laying people off, but I'm using these tools to empower them. He says, because, and this is the important quote, effort scales poorly, but leverage compounds. So if you're using AI for leverage, your opportunities compound. And all of a sudden he has this boring air filter business that's worth $250 million. Holy crap. So they're doing 2 times what they normally do at half the time spent. Fascinating. There's a lot of other good stuff. Chris McGurk got up. I don't know if you got a chance to see Chris.
I did.
Yeah.
No, it
What'd you
was like a
think?
rock star panel. Seldom do these things go into overtime, and people, like, when they ended it, he's
Yeah.
they call it Next Generation Studio. What do they call it?
Next Generation Studio tech company. Yeah. Chris, full disclosure, I worked for Chris. I was a VP of corporate communications under Chris when we were both. He was COO at MGM. He also worked at Disney and Universal and has a lot of stories. And he runs Cineverse and has been a
Right,
sponsor of
Cineverse.
ours and all the
Yeah,
rest.
we
So
have deep ties. We go back a long way with them in various respects. But the way Chris describes it is they developed their own technology and it made all the difference because they own all their own tools. They're able to look at businesses like vertical dramas and say, oh, we could be in that. We could make it even better mousetrap in his words, and make more money off it. If you look at it at a glance, it's a hodgepodge of businesses. But really what it is an elegant collection of things that are going to turn into really lucrative revenue streams. Look at their
yeah,
motion picture business. When he talks about
but
Terrifier,
yeah,
man,
yeah. The Terrifier story is great. I wrote about that a couple of years ago when it came out, but it's really fascinating how that arc from unknown stiff horror movie from unknown director that ends up somehow finding a lengthy online process. Their website that follows horror said, this guy's got a sequel coming out, and I think it's going to be big. And Tony Weedor, who we've interviewed, was the guy that said, yeah, it's going to be something. So he was
let me
right.
just do the economics, and you probably have the numbers in your head. So if I'm wrong, just correct me, because I do remember you wrote about that. For Terrifier 3, they go to Bloody Disgusting, which is a leading horror brand that's just tied into the fandom, and say, hey, what's a good independent property that we can acquire?
Well, they found it after Terrifier 1 came out. They put some money into they spent like less than 100,000 on marketing up front with like inventory they had on their social and websites like Bloody Disgusting for Terrifier 2, and a little money to help him finish the production. He'd basically been done. And that did 11 million in domestic box office, which is pretty great on something that costs less than $1 million to make. And then Terrifier 3, they knew what they had.
They spend like less than $100,000 to market these movies, and they use their technology to push them around, distribute them, get them marketed, and when they're done, I mean, 15 million might not sound like a ton of money in the motion picture business, but when you're spending less than a million on P&A, it's downright profitable.
Downright. Chris had a good point. He says, look, between his time I mean, he was at PepsiCo before all this back in the day and got recruited over to Disney. Disney said, would you rather sell sugar water or like do movies and change the world and stuff? And so Chris, he said he's probably been involved in the release of 750 to 1,000 movies over his 40 years in the business. He has never ever had a film with this crazy ratio of marketing spend to box office return. And I completely believe it. So they've got a little model now. And the fascinating thing to me was they got a call from, of all people, Horror Meister, I mean, the artist among artists in horror, Guillermo del Toro, the Oscar-winning director and writer, who wants to do a project on the 20th anniversary of Pan's Labyrinth, a fantastic film, but a hard film in some ways about the Spanish Civil War, of
20
all
years?
things.
20 years,
20
man.
years. Yeah. I took my kids to that knowing that it was a little ahead of them and not a lot ahead of them. And it kind of punched them in the face a little bit, but they were like, no, that was really a good movie. Thanks for taking it. I mean, it was interesting, but it's a hell of a film. And he said back then, Guillermo wasn't quite Guillermo. Now he is. And he's calling us up and saying, I saw what you guys did with Terrifier. Can you do that with this next Pan's Labyrinth? So kind of fascinating to see what might happen with that. Again, faster, cheaper, more accurate. That's their pitch with their tech side with Matchpoint, but they've got the marketing components to certainly to tap into highly defined demographics. And I find that really interesting. And now they've gotten into microdramas, and that'll be interesting. Couple tidbits from the microdrama stuff. They talked too much, not too much. They talked a lot about other stuff and then they ran up against time, but they talked briefly about the microdrama. Two things that I thought were interesting. He says, it doesn't cost much, 25,000 to 300,000 to make these things. And you can find an audience, an $8 billion business worldwide, 8.5 billion. But what's interesting right now is the companies out of China that own some of these platforms are basically running them like they're mobile game companies. And so they're spending $2 million a day in customer acquisition, which is exactly out of all those Chinese mobile video game. That's their playbook. So he said that changes the economics. And I don't know where that's going to go. We're having to figure out how we work within all that. So I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Fascinating day. So we'll get ahead of the light and get up on out of here. What say
Sounds
you?
good. Still got the social hour, and I, unlike certain other people on this podcast, am a social fellow. With that, I am David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT and Next TMT Talks with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, here at the DEG EnTech Fest at the lovely grounds of the Skirball Cultural Center at the top of the Sepulveda Pass in Los Angeles. A fine place for lots of events, and always happy to come up here. It's a little bit Olympian in the views and everything else. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, of course, as always, to our partner at Media Play News. This is David Bloom with Daniel Frankel. Over and out.